Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine sitting at a long wooden table inside a cold, dim hall lit only by flickering candles. Before you lies a bowl of watery stew, brown, bubbling, and suspiciously smelling of smoke and old meat. You're hungry, trembling from the icy wind slipping through cracks in the walls. You lift the spoon, and freeze. Floating on top is something you'd rather not name. Welcome to dinner, the medieval way. People often dream of medieval feasts, roasted pigs, golden goblets, overflowing platters. But the truth? Most of the time, food sucked. And not just tasteless, it was a struggle between life and hunger, hope and despair. This is the story of that struggle, told through the eyes of Alden, a poor village baker's son, whose life turned with every loaf he tried to bake. It's the story of why food wasn't just sustenance, it was survival. Alden was born in the small village of Greyvale, a name that matched its skies, dull, smoky, and forever heavy with clouds. His father, Tomas, was the town's baker. Though Baker was generous, he baked what little he could. Flour was rare, grain even rarer, and the oven often burned more wood than it could spare. In those days, bread wasn't soft or golden, it was dark, heavy, and filled with bits of bark or ground peas. The rich could afford wheat, the poor survived on whatever they could grind. Every dawn, Alden rose before the roosters, his hands stiff from the cold, helping his father knead the hard dough. Their fingers were always cracked, dusted white with ash rather than flour. Yet Alden dreamed, he dreamed of one day tasting a real loaf, pure wheat bread, like the ones baked for the Lord's table at the manor. He imagined its warmth, the sweet smell, a taste of heaven. But dreams were dangerous in Greyvale. When the winter famine struck, everything changed. The grain stores emptied, the wells froze, and even the rats grew thin. Tomas tried to stretch the flour with ground acorns and sawdust, but people began to fall sick. The smell of baking no longer brought comfort, it brought despair. Alden saw his father cry one night, the man who had never once flinched before hunger or pain. "Son," Tomas whispered, "a baker without flour is a man without purpose." That winter, Tomas fell ill. Alden, just 16, had to take his father's place. But what could he bake when there was nothing left? He scavenged the frozen fields for wild barley, traded his boots for salt, even dug into old grain sacks chewed by mice. Every loaf he baked was a prayer, that someone wouldn't starve that day. Then came the day the Lord's messenger arrived, demanding bread for the manor's feast. Alden stood there, trembling. "We have nothing left," he said. The man sneered. "Then find something. The Lord's stomach doesn't wait for peasants." That night, Alden baked. He mixed bark, roots, and a handful of saved flour. The smell was bitter, but he wrapped the loaves carefully and carried them to the manor at dawn. When he returned, his mother was waiting by the dying fire. "Did they pay you?" she asked softly. Alden looked down. "No, they took the bread. Said it was owed." His mother didn't answer. She just looked at the empty shelves, the ashes in the oven, and the cold creeping through their home. That was the day Alden learned. In the medieval world, food wasn't about flavor, it was about power. A few weeks later, Greyvale's church bells rang for the manor's grand feast, a celebration of the harvest that barely existed. The villagers were forced to attend, to show gratitude to their lord. Alden watched from the back as tables overflowed with roasted meat, pies stuffed with fruit, golden loaves, foods he had never seen. The smell alone made him dizzy. His stomach growled painfully, but he said nothing. The Lord raised his cup. "To the land that feeds us," he declared. Alden bit his lip. "Feed you," he thought bitterly. Because down in the village, children were chewing bark and boiled roots. That night, when everyone stumbled home, Alden wandered to the kitchens. The servants were tossing leftovers into the mud, bread, meat, fish. He grabbed what he could, wrapping scraps in cloth. But as he turned to leave, the head cook, a woman named Mara, stopped him. "Hungry, boy?" Alden froze, expecting punishment. But she just smiled sadly. "Take it. I remember hunger." That night, Alden shared the food with his village. The children ate, the elders wept, and for one night, Grey Vale slept with full stomachs. Days turned into weeks. Mara began secretly leaving scraps for him, bits of cheese, bread ends, vegetable peels. Alden learned from her about herbs, spices, and flavors he never knew existed. He began to dream again, not of eating, but of feeding others. But then came the plague. The Lord's men sealed the manor, cutting off the village entirely. People grew desperate. Without trade, the flour vanished, the animals died, and hunger returned fiercer than ever. Alden, now 18, refused to watch his people die. He broke into the manor's grain cellar one stormy night, guided by hunger and courage. He filled his sack with grain, enough to save dozens. But as he fled, the guards caught him. They beat him, dragged him before the Lord. "Stealing from your master?" the Lord roared. "You'll hang for this." Alden spat blood and said quietly, "My people were starving. A loaf of bread shouldn't cost a life." The Lord's face twisted in rage. "Then you'll learn what hunger truly feels like." They locked him in the cold dungeon, feeding him only scraps every few days. Mara, heartbroken, snuck him bits of food when she could. But Alden grew weaker, his dreams fading into darkness. And yet, even then, he whispered a vow. "If I ever walk free again, no one in Grey Vale will starve." The days turned into weeks. Down in the dark, damp cell, Alden's body weakened, but his spirit didn't. He would listen to the sounds above, laughter, footsteps, feasts, the echo of a world that had forgotten what hunger felt like. But one stormy night, Mara came. Her lantern flickered as she whispered, "The Lord has fallen sick. The plague reached the manor. The guards are fleeing." She unlocked the cell with trembling hands. "Go, Alden. Go before they find you." Alden could barely stand, but her words gave him strength. He limped through the manor halls, once filled with music, now silent except for the wind howling through cracked windows. Tables were overturned, plates scattered, and half-eaten food rotting where the wealthy once dined. He looked around and thought, even the rich cannot eat when death is at the door. Before he left, he went to the kitchen, to the heart of it all, where pots still simmered faintly. He found Mara kneeling by the hearth, tears in her eyes. "I tried to save what I could," she said. Alden knelt beside her and whispered, "Then we'll start again. Not for them. For us." Together, they filled sacks with grain, dried meat, and roots, what remained of the manor's stores. Alden carried them on his back through the storm, the weight nearly breaking him. But every step forward was a victory. When he reached Grey Vale, the sight broke his heart. The once bustling streets were empty, doors hung open, snow drifted into homes. The people were too weak to even greet him. He set up a small fire in the village square and began to cook. Mara joined him, feeding the flames as Alden ground the last of the grain into flour. That night, the smell of baking bread filled the air, rich, warm, alive. The villagers emerged, one by one, drawn by the scent. "It's bread," a little girl whispered. Alden smiled, handing her a small piece. "The kind that saves lives." They ate in silence, tears in their eyes. For the first time in months, they weren't just surviving, they were living. From that day, Alden became known not as the baker's son, but as the baker who defied hunger itself. He built ovens in every corner of Grey Vale, teaching others how to bake using wild grains, herbs, even tree bark in better ways, turning scraps into sustenance. He refused to charge anyone starving. His motto spread through the nearby villages. "A loaf shared is a life saved." Years passed. The famine ended, and the world slowly changed. New farming methods came, trade routes opened, and food, true food, became more than a luxury for the rich. But Alden never forgot those winters. He never forgot the taste of bark bread, or the night he stole grain to keep hope alive. One evening, an old man came to his bakery, where the fire always burned bright. The man looked frail, lost, his clothes tattered, his eyes hollow. Alden smiled and handed him a loaf. "Eat," he said softly. It's warm. The old man took a bite and began to cry. I haven't eaten real bread in days. Alden nodded. I know that feeling well. And as the man ate, Alden looked out at the village, children laughing, people sharing meals, ovens glowing in the dusk. The world still had hunger, still had hardship, but it also had people willing to feed one another. And that, he realized, was the true feast humanity had been starving for all along. Ending hook, the taste that time forgot. So the next time you picture medieval life, grand feasts, shiny goblets, roasted pigs, remember Alden. Remember that behind every loaf was a story of struggle, resilience, and hope. Because in those dark centuries, food wasn't about taste, it was about survival, and the brave souls who dared to share it. And maybe, just maybe, that's why the bread of the past still smells like courage.